most of what I have to say is in response to the remarks that some of the remarks that Comrade Wolf made in his alternative presentation to the meeting. I hesitate to call it a contribution to the discussion. It was more like, when the government presents the budget and you get the government party on one night and you get the opposition on the next night to give the response. We went through every contradiction in the world until we came up to the actual point of the presentation, which was that it was wrong to put forward the slogan "Victory to Gaddafi." Now, both Wilf and I, for good or for ill, largely learnt our politics, at least initially, from Comrade Mao.
I thought you'd be Jew.
Well, this is no time for levity, comrade. Wolf and I both learnt our politics to a very large extent from Comrade Mao Zedong. And what Mao said, I think I wish to repeat here, is that Mao pointed out that yes, in any situation, there are always any number of contradictions. There are always thousands of contradictions. But that one of those contradictions is always primary. And Mao went on to say that also even within the primary contradiction, there is always the primary aspect of the primary contradiction. And Mao also said, grasp the key link and everything else falls into place. And Chairman Mao also said, support what the enemy opposes and oppose what the enemy supports. Now, I think if one keeps this framework in mind, one won't really go wrong in making one's assessment of the situation. All the other things are terribly interesting, but that has to be our starting point. Comrade Wilf also talked about the contradiction between the national bourgeoisie and the oppressed nations on the one hand, and the workers and peasants of those countries. And of course, one agrees with him on that. And he said, and Comrade Wilf went on to say, that we are not calling for the status quo. Again, I agree. None of us here are calling for the status quo. We are calling. We are on the side of progress. We are on the side of revolution. But we are not in favour of replacing a status quo where that status quo is a national bourgeoisie that to a greater or lesser extent is independent of imperialism. We are not in favour of changing that status quo in favour of a return to rule by imperialism and comprador elements. We are, in general terms, in the conditions of rule by the national bourgeoisie or in the oppressed nations, we are in favour of the steadily and progressively deepening the anti-imperialist revolution and carrying that anti-imperialist revolution through to the end, i.e. carrying the anti-imperialist revolution forward until it takes the road of socialism and goes on to build socialism and communism. That is our basic standpoint of principle. However, we also look at each and every situation as it exists at this particular moment. Comrades have mentioned the Spanish Civil War, and I also want to use that analogy. We are not in favour of the status quo, but when, during the Spanish Civil War, the Trotskyites of the POUM and the anarchists called for taking away the land of all the landlords, irrespective of whether they were on the side of the Republic or the side of Franco or they were neutral, and setting up communes and collectivizing the land at that stage, the communists were against that. Why? Not because they are in favour of the status quo, but because they were in favour of dealing with the main contradiction at hand, which was the defeat of fascism and uniting all anti-fascist forces to that end. Equally, in the case of China, during the War of Resistance against Japan, the Chinese Communist Party, led by Comrade Mao Zedong, actually returned land to the landlords in a number of instances, so long as those landlords agreed to fight the Japanese and to ease the burden on the peasants to a certain degree. That was a correct policy, even though it was a retreat from the very policies of expropriating the landlords and carrying forward the land reform in China, which the communists had secured at the expense not of the loss of lives of one or two communists and one or two peasants, but at the expense of the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. So this is not a moralistic question of who killed who at any particular time. It is a practical, concrete political issue. The point was raised, somewhat in contradiction to some of the other points perhaps, that we should be in favour of the victory of an anti-imperialist leader, even if that leader is unpopular in their own country. And again, I agree with that. But I want to just qualify that in the sense that if that's some kind of analogy or something about Libya, let's be clear, Gaddafi is extremely popular in his country. Gaddafi is extremely popular. If Gaddafi was not popular in his country and amongst his own people, he would have been out years ago, and B, he would have certainly been out within the last few months. The most powerful imperialist nations on earth are pulverizing Libya night after night. They are hunting Gaddafi personally. They are murdering his children and grandchildren. Does he stay in power because he has a kind of magic cloak that he wears, that he borrowed from Merlin? No, he stays in power because the masses of people in Libya support him. And as Harpal indicated, they support him not because they are stupid, but for very good, concrete, practical, materialist reasons. And let's look at some of the people who in particular support Gaddafi in Libya, because obviously Libyan society is split. The counter-revolutionaries also represent a certain section of the Libyan population. But amongst the people who support Gaddafi are the black people in Libya, because tell me, in which other North African country do you see black people, black Africans given respect, given equality, seen as ambassadors, as government ministers, as leaders of the oil corporation, and so on? And amongst the other people he's supported by the women of Libya, because they don't want to go back to living under medieval domination. People like to say that Gaddafi is eccentric and so on. And one of the examples of Gaddafi's supposed eccentricity that we're given is that all his bodyguards are women, and they think, oh, isn't this kind of photogenically eccentric? Now, why did Gaddafi make all his bodyguards women? He did so for two reasons. One, because he wanted to make a statement to every man in Libya that women are equal, they can do anything, and they should be treated with the same respect as men could be treated. And what better way could he do that than by entrusting his own personal security to women? And secondly, because Gaddafi said that women and black people have gained the most from the revolution in Libya, therefore they have the greatest interest in defending it. The point was, I don't want to get into detail of this point about Gaddafi supposedly having killed communists. To the best of my knowledge, and I've looked into this, there has never existed a communist party in Libya, so I don't quite know what that's about. Wilf also raised the question of the Russian and Chinese abstentions in the United Nations Security Council. And for the record, I think that the Russian and Chinese abstentions in the UN Security Council were totally reprehensible. Yes. Equally reprehensible was the actual vote in favour of the resolution cast by South Africa, because if it hadn't been for Libya and Colonel Gaddafi, the ANC probably wouldn't even be in government in South Africa. So yes, that was quite reprehensible. But the way it was presented, including with this, and some people here say that China is socialist, is just a matter of, saying that I don't like the slogan "Victory to Gaddafi," so let me think of anything that I can throw to knock that slogan down. Because, as Wilf rightly said, yes, we find the Russian and Chinese action on the Security Council reprehensible. But what is our job? Our job is to deal with the issues of the movement here. So it's not a case of saying that, oh, we mustn't criticise the leadership of Stop the War because Russia and China have done something bad, especially when one then ends up in the position that apparently the Stop the War hasn't, Stop the War's position in terms of slogans is actually better, is supposedly better than ours in the first place. Now, Stop the War coalition. Now, my problem with Stop the War is not that it's a broad organisation. My problem with Stop the War is it's not a broad organisation. It is an organisation whose leadership is dominated by two opportunist organisations. It is an organisation that would never invite a consistently anti-imperialist or communist voice onto one of its platforms. And it is an organisation that refuses to stand with the overwhelming majority of the people of the world, because the overwhelming majority of the people of the world oppose imperialism. And we had, and Godfrey spoke about one example of what happened outside the picket of Downing Street. I'll give you another example. There was British imperialism invited every type of riffraff to a meeting in Lancaster House to discuss the supposed future of Libya. And outside there were 200 or so Libyans demonstrating in support of Gaddafi. And then in a massive mobilisation jointly by Stop the War and CND, around 15 people, with Kate Hudson and various other luminaries, turned up. And because the 200 Libyans were taking a stand in support of Gaddafi, CND and Stop the War refused to stand with them. They went and stood somewhere else and had their own massive, broad democratic mobilisation of 15 people. Now, please tell me, who is sectarian in this? Is it the people who join the masses of people throughout the world in their support of Libya, or is it the people who would who will not take their opposition to their own ruling class sufficiently far as to reach the point where they actually oppose them? Now, briefly, I know I'm taking up too much time, but just briefly on Egypt, because a couple of points have been raised. I have to take issue with the statement that all we've had in Egypt is a military coup. Yes, it's true that, of course, imperialism and local reactionaries will try to stabilise the situation that's emerged post-Mubarak in a way that benefits their own interests. And yes, the struggle is very far from over. But to take an analogy, when there was the Kerensky government in Russia, did that mean that the working class should rest content with the Kerensky government, or should they seek to overthrow the Kerensky government? Well, Lenin and the Bolshevik Party answered that question in practice. But did the emergence of the Kerensky government mean that it was wrong to overthrow the Tsar, or that overthrowing the Tsar meant nothing? No, of course it didn't mean that. I think one of the important things, I think there's just two important things I want to bring out about the Egyptian situation, one of which hopefully in some measure will answer Daniel's question. First of all is that one of the things that we rarely hear in Britain, although Anne mentioned about the trade unionist speaker that she went to hear, is that in the new situation that's emerging in Egypt, the proletariat, the industrial working class, steel workers and so on, are increasingly taking the lead in the struggle. And the proletariat in Egypt is a very significant part of the population. Secondly, even with the present government that's emerged, the military rulers of Egypt as they are at the moment, on the one hand they are attempting to slow down any progressive change in Egypt. They are suppressing the proletariat. They're calling them, oh, you must go back and stabilise things because we're losing tourism revenue and so on. But even that government has made some very real changes in the role that Egypt has played in the region. They are talking about re-establishing diplomatic relations with Iran. Egypt has not had diplomatic relations with Iran for more than 30 years, not since just after the Islamic Revolution. They allowed, for the first time since the Islamic Revolution, Iranian warships to pass through the Suez Canal on their way to Lebanon. They have moved from a position of doing everything they could to sabotage Palestinian unity to the point where they actually facilitated and brokered the ongoing reconciliation between Hamas and Fatah. They have stopped building the wall that the Mubarak regime was building on the frontier with Gaza to reinforce the Zionist blockade, and they have said that the Rafah crossing into Gaza will be opened, which will, when it happens, will deal a huge blow to the genocidal Israeli blockade of Gaza. And for if only for these reasons, which of course, to come to Daniel's point, of course encourage the Palestinian people in these anti-Nakba protests, for these reasons alone, I would say that the overthrow of the Mubarak regime is worth celebrating. Thank you very much.
Comrade Chairman, in view of the excellent, some of the excellent contributions from the floor and the very good summing up by Keith, there is really not much for me to say, but there are a couple of points that have actually been made, but I want to emphasize because I don't want them lost in the translation. One thing is, the point was made by Comrade Welf that it's up to the Libyans to defeat imperialism, it's up to the Afghans to defeat imperialism. We cannot do anything here. We can do a lot. My party...
Do nothing. I mean, you actually
Comrade, I didn't interrupt you.
I'm going to have a chance to come back.
Comrade,
Paraphrase a lot of things. I never said that.
Comrade, I have got your words written down, but I don't want to enter into an argument at this late stage. Now is not the time to dispute it.
We can do nothing. We might as well just go home. You obviously know I don't think that.
You must choose your words carefully then. I didn't put words in your mouth. I have actually got your words saying, we can't secure the defeat of imperialism. These are your exact words. It's up to the Libyans or whoever they are. But it doesn't matter. You didn't say that. Well, I'm very pleased you didn't say that. Well, I don't want you to say that.
That wasn't the words you said before. You actually read the words that you read out.
Comrade, please. It's not it's not in my interest to create opposition for no reason. We're in the business of influence, comrades. If you didn't say that, I actually welcome that. But I all the same want to make the point, whether you made that point or not, there's a lot that the British working class and the European and the American working class can do, and that is they have the power to stop these wars in tracks by refusing to cooperate with these wars. We never ever tire of referring to the contribution made by London dockers to prevent the intervention in the war of intervention against the young Soviet Republic in Russia after the Bolshevik Revolution. What a wonderful thing was that the dockers refused to load the armaments and ammunition on the Jolly George. Now that's something glorious. We actually can say that the moment we bring out no cooperation with the war, they say, no, Quakers will get angry. No, pastors for peace would not like it. For God's sake, they're pastors for peace, not for making war. Why would they agree with us that we shouldn't be making wars against other countries?
No, you get the trade unions into trouble.
So who
and you can't tell workers what to do.
Are you supposed to be interrupting me?
No.
Yeah, well then, you chair the meeting, not interrupt me. There's plenty of other interruptions coming. I can do without some help from friendly quarters. So the basic thing is the working class has the power. The moment you say the working class hasn't got the power, you actually declared yourself, as Ranjit said earlier in his contribution, you declared yourself redundant. Oh, we are all sinners, there's nothing that can be done in this world, it's all ruled by powerful sinners, and that's it. So you made your noises, you held your meeting, you made your speeches, and you can go home and watch the life of Brian. That's not what this life is about. Secondly, this is an argument that my and comrades of my age, and Wilf is a bit younger, but Wilf should know it too because we've been together for a long time. This argument has been thrown in our faces till we are sick. This is a broad organization. The broad organization cannot have this slogan. This is for a revolutionary organization. Revolutionary organization has one slogan and broad organizations have another slogan. We had this argument over the Vietnam War. We had this argument during the struggle to support the liberation struggle in Zimbabwe, and we have the same paroxysm on the same blessed spot now. Now, the purpose of revolutionary slogans of the party is to actually make them the slogans of the masses. If the slogans of the party remain to be the slogans of the party, they will never ever be put into effect. We are simply saying, are you or are you not for the defeat of our ruling class? Are you or are you not in favor of the victory of the people who are being aggressed against by our ruling class? If your answer to both these is yes, then it's your duty to go and say that. We have, Godfrey gave some examples. We said years ago in Stop the War Coalition, victory to the resistance. As Godfrey reported, they said no, Quakers won't like it. Anti-ED wouldn't like it. Tom Cobley wouldn't like it. They came up with everybody who possibly wouldn't like, and we couldn't dig up Tom Cobley. He's been dead for a long time, as Kenna would know from. He's from the West Country. We couldn't bring
his father.
We can't bring these people. But the fact of the matter is, just over a year ago, the resolution that was presented by the CPGB-ML asking for victory to resistance was passed. It was passed. They couldn't have any arguments anymore, and we kept on knocking, and it was, as the Bible would say, opened unto us. So we had the resolution. And we are pushing for a resolution that where we say the working class has the power to stop this.
The way around. No cooperation has been passed. The victory of the resistance was never passed.
Was it not passed?
No.
No cooperation?
Was passed.
Yeah, but no cooperation. Well, if it is no cooperation, then you've got to go and do something about actually putting it into effect. No cooperation is not passing a resolution. It's actually going to your trade union and saying you will actually not cooperate. And when we raise this question at the PSC and whatnot, and what do they say? One woman, she claims to be a big trade unionist, never heard of her. She said, there's a whole lot of increase in unemployment. At this time, to tell the workers to withhold their labor power is actually to endanger their jobs. They're jokers. They expect the peoples in other countries to lay down their lives in fighting against imperialism, and they're worried about what will happen to their jobs. You only lose your jobs if you are a single person protesting against your employment or against the cooperation. But if the working class is united and say, we will not cooperate with this war, then in those circumstances, nobody loses the job. And our strength has always been in numbers. We've got to mobilize lots and lots of people. And I think that's the vision that we must take to the working class. These are the slogans, that victory to the oppressed peoples of the world. Victory to the working class of Europe, death to imperialism, non-cooperation with the war. These slogans must permeate every activity of ours and every activity in every working class organization and outfit that we go into. Unless we do that, we just windbags. This is not a discussion forum just to sharpen your wits or our wits or to show knowledge who has more knowledge than that. We've got to carry this through. And before I leave, Wilf, I did not in any way wish to upset you or distort you. If I have inadvertently done it, I apologize. I did not do that. I've got your actual words. We can discuss that. But I think what should come out of it is there should be no one in this room who is opposed to the line of defeat for imperialism. There should be no one in this room who says we will not work for non-cooperation with the warmongering activities of our ruling class. There should be nobody who should not wish for victory of the oppressed people. Thank you very much.